Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today's episode is going to be all about catching up and doing the things that we have needed reed fiber to be able to do, starting with just about everything that would require a suit. And why is there water in the bathroom? We're also going to be ending our reliance on the stone hatch, mostly because we're out of granite. We do still have some sedimentary rock, but we don't want the hatches to end up eating all of our raw minerals. We're going to start by putting down a wonderful exosuit forge. No big deal here. In fact, I think this episode's going to have a relative lack of chaos. So I apologize in advance for those of you who really don't like the sort of colony maintenance episodes. Why is our water sieve breaking? Because the polluted water is at minus 10 degrees. And I suppose it's that cold because the carbon dioxide that the carbon skimmer is eating is that cold. In fact, if you highlight over polluted water, it says that the polluted water will be the combined temperature of the input materials. While the water is coming in at 9.2 degrees, the carbon dioxide is coming in at minus 16. So I'm not sure how it's combining, but 1,000 grams of water at 10 degrees plus 300 grams of carbon dioxide at minus 16 shouldn't be combining to make minus 16 polluted water. I see what's happening now. The water is coming into the carbon skimmer at the 10 degrees, but as soon as it's dumped off into the carbon skimmer that is sitting at minus 12 degrees, it instantly sort of cools the water. Fixing this is not going to be too big of a deal. We're just going to throw some radiant pipes right next to the grill, and that way it'll pick up a little bit of the heat right here, hopefully warming the polluted water up enough so we stop breaking the water sieve. Now, stopping our reliance on stone hatches is not going to be too difficult. We're literally just going to double the amount of sleet wheat that we're growing, double the amount of bristle blossoms that we're growing, and then we're just going to sort of stop feeding the hatches. We'll probably keep one hatch ranch going for now. That way we have a steady supply of coal still coming in. Of course, feeding one full hatch ranch, with each hatch consuming 140 kilos worth of sedimentary rock per cycle, equates to 1,120 kilos per cycle overall, which means we'd be back to the same sort of predicament in about 360 cycles. So on second thought, until we find a renewable source of these materials, we're just going to stop feeding hatches altogether. Well, at least we figured out where all the water was coming from in the bathroom, although I fear it's been happening for a little bit longer than we would prefer. The radiant pipe method worked out perfect. The polluted water is still coming in pretty chill, but by the time it finishes its run through the radiant liquid pipes, it's all above zero. So I was in the middle of planning out where we're going to put twice as many bristle blossoms, and I realized if we're not going to be ranching hatches anymore, we probably don't need to wait for all these hatches to naturally expire, because if the hatches move out, we'll be able to put more bristle blossoms right through here. Unfortunately, hatches don't like to go down without a fight. Just about every dupe in the colony now has a little bit of damage, and I think I've just had a rare epiphany. Instead of exactly doubling the amount of bristle blossoms, why don't we just double how fast they end up growing by using the farm stations and applying fertilizer to them? This might make even more sense when we consider the cost in dirt for the sleet wheats. By using a farming station, we can make the sleet wheats grow in 9 cycles instead of 18 and still use the exact same amount of dirt. Yes, the fertilizer synthesizer required to make more fertilizer takes dirt, but it only takes 65 grams per second. For that, we're going to be given 120 grams worth of fertilizer, but also 10 grams per second of natural gas. And if you know anything about the natural gas generator, you end up getting polluted water back out from it. And you know what we can do with that polluted water? Turn it into water and more dirt. It's the circle of life, really. We're still a little while away from building a giant industrial brick and throwing things like natural gas generators in it, but for the meantime, we're sitting at 340 tons of dirt, so I think we'll be okay. Not to mention that we still have the stable full of pips, creating us more dirt every single cycle. Additionally, the fertilizer is going to save us a lot in water as well, because remember, both the sleet wheat and the bristle blossom are thirsty boys. And while we do have 3 beautiful geysers giving us a lot of water, the more water we save, the more we can do other things with it. With the farm stations installed, the queen's going to be able to apply all the fertilization the plants need. So just like that, we've doubled our production. thanks to the wonderful farmer's touch buff that the fertilization provides. Next, we're going to try to save a little bit on duplicate labor, which is going to be one of the additional costs of fertilizing all the plants. Because not only does the dupe have to take fertilizer and turn it into micronutrient fertilizer, but then they also have to apply the fertilizer to each plant. And as we can see, that is not without a time cost. Oh, hi, Mission Lord. You'll be okay. Luckily, the farmer's skill in agriculture impacts how long the farmer's touch lasts. In this case, the Queen has a agriculture score of 12, so we're getting a little bit more than 2 cycles for each application. But long story short, by using auto sweepers to help get all those bristleberries down to the kitchen, we'll also save a little bit on duplicate labor. Of course, this also cost us in terms of metal ores and refined metals. Now, when the bristle blossoms are harvested, they'll ride the rail system all the way down to our kitchen. That's had a slight makeover. Because we're not going to be cooking any barbecue, we didn't need the second electrical grill. But now with our entire diet being berry sludge, I figured it'd be helpful to have 2 micro mushers. I really wish we could take the berry sludge and turn it into something else in the electric grill. Something like, I don't know, deep fried berry sludge. The next problem we're having, once again, has to do with oxygen. As you can see, our sleet wheat don't want to grow. And it's due to a problem that we don't encounter too much. All plants have a minimum air pressure they have to be sitting in. And right now, there's only 40 grams worth of oxygen pressure in this room. Why, might you ask? Well, oxygen's not flowing as steady as it once was. And the reason why has to do with water. As you can see, the water is looking a little thin. And when we trace the issue, it all comes back to this system here. Right now, we're 100% on brine. And if you remember from last episode, we explained that when brine's going through a desalinator, we're actually only producing 3,500 grams worth of water. And the 3,500 grams is being drank by all of the sleet wheat, the bristle blossoms, the carbon skimmer, and the oxygen. Not to mention, when the desalinator fills up with salt, a dupe has to come by and, well, desalinate it by emptying all the salt out, which takes even more time. So we really do need to start tapping into some of this salt water. Unfortunately, it's 90 degrees no matter which way you cut it. Okay, not a big deal. Use some of the wonderful new Atmos suits we have. Well, yeah, that takes care of one problem. But the second problem is the fact that a 90-degree water will end up stifling all these plants. And I can't feed the 90-degree water to the electrolyzer setup because everything would start overheating because we had to use copper and copper ore due to our wonderful lack of gold. Not a big deal still. Just means that we need to cool down this water. Well, cooling it down requires plastic. And it's going to be a little while until we get plastic. As soon as this Draco is done incubating, we're going to throw the glossy Draco egg in there. We don't plan on ranching it. We're just going to have it hatch so we can start getting a little bit of plastic from the shearing station. Then we'll be able to make a steam turbine and thermo aqua tuner setup to be able to chill this salt water, send it through a desalinator itself, and then finally send that desalinated and cooled water into our thirsty colony. But until we have the plastic to get that implemented, we're going to start dumping all the salt water in here and switch the desalinator over to start using salt water instead of brine, so we're getting a little bit more throughput on the water. So we'll install one steel liquid pump down here, connect it all up, grab some of this wonderful conductive wire, and connect it as well. Unfortunately, the duplicates are going to get a little bit scalded, but they'll be fine. The alternative would be putting a whole suit system here, and quite frankly, we don't have time for that. One day we'll get to that, but today's not that day. That is much better. You can see we're starting to get the backlog of water going into the electrolyzers, and the salt water here is starting to back up as well. This brine's doing a great job of transferring temperatures. The salt water's still at about 70 degrees, but the longer it's in there, the colder it's going to get. Okay, I apparently spoke too soon. This was supposed to be a relatively simple maintenance episode with no big deals, and everything is falling apart. Let's turn off this pump. So what we're going to do is go back to using the brine, which for the system I'm using means just send nothing but a green signal. This is the green tank and this is the red tank. And what I mean by that is we have 2 liquid shutoffs controlled by this timer sensor. I was doing a sort of half and half, 300 seconds and 300 seconds, but with this salt water being too warm, we're going to have to use 100% brine. Suppose while we wait on that plastic, we'll start installing some of these suits, which then starts to beg the question, where are we going to end up putting these suits? I've been kind of digging the idea of not having an enclosed base, but the subject of Atmos suits and those places that you need to be wearing them sort of get in that way. But the places where we actually need to wear them are all over here on this side of the map. Out here in space, if we were to put a desalinator in the water here, and then another desalinator in this water here. And that way the duplicate could breathe and not get scalded while they're emptying the desalinator. So I think we might as well put the suit docks right here. And then all we have to do is not allow access through these doors here, and the duplicates will be forced to go out this way. We're also going to install a new ladder system that's a little bit closer to that entrance for a couple of reasons. One, it'll be quicker to get up here, but two, by removing this ladder, the duplicates will no longer be subjected to the negative D-core being caused by all the heavy watt wire. And I suppose since we're doing okay on copper, we can actually install a fire pole now. The colony's first glossy has been born. Now as soon as it grows up, we can start shearing it. And it can't come too soon because the temperature issue is starting to get out of control. Now the one thing we have to keep an eye on is our fertilizer. Right now we only have 4 tons of it. So it'd probably be smart if we started creating some more now. And I think right here is going to work out perfect. Now the system we're going to create is going to make fertilizer production 100% automated. We'll start with a fertilizer synthesizer made out of steel. It has 3 requirements: polluted water, dirt, and phosphorite. Just so happens we have some polluted water here, we have some dirt coming out of the pips, and then we have some phosphorite being created by the Drecos. Now we already have a dirt line heading over to the sleet wheat, so I think we'll just put a 50% split here and add a conveyor receptacle. That way when this receptacle is full, it'll start backing up on this line, and all the dirt will bypass and head right to the sleet wheat. I don't think conveyor receptacles have an overheat temperature, so we don't have to make that out of steel. The polluted water requires an intake. Now while it might be easier to take it from the carbon skimmer, we don't know if that carbon skimmer is going to be there forever. So we're going to take it directly off of this line here. Looking at this system right now, we're taking all the excess polluted water and turning it right back into oxygen. I think we actually have to stop that. Now when this backs up, we'll have excess polluted water instead of clean water. And we can take it, bring it all the way to the top of our base, and plug it right in to the fertilizer synthesizer. The next ingredient we need is the actual phosphorite. And this is going to be an expensive proposition, once again in terms of ores and metals, but we gotta do what we gotta do. Oh, I am not looking forward to this run. We'll go up here, all the way up there. We will run out of copper ore, and then request some more from Enverolin. Our main colony power line has had just about enough. It is sitting at 9,000 watts of potential load, and we just keep adding more and more to it. We are already to the business of creating fertilizer. Great news for us. But I was checking on this polluted water line, realizing, oh wow, we already have a backlog? And that's when I saw this disaster. Because this carbon skimmer is creating so much extra polluted water, the fertilizer synthesizer cannot use it fast enough. And before I design a whole new system, I wanted to see how much carbon dioxide it was still left in here, and yeah, it's still 270 kilos. So this carbon skimmer has to stay on for a little bit longer. I suppose in the end we're just going to leave it. It doesn't stop the duplicates from being able to use the sinks, showers, or the toilets, because it's all being done with 50-50 splits, so it'll be fine until we finish using this carbon skimmer. Okay, maybe not 100% fine, because the outputs do get full. It just takes a little while until the polluted water starts moving again. So duplicates, if you have to use the bathroom, just wait a second, flush it twice, and make sure everything's gone first, okay? Thank you. Alright, I found a workaround. This one involves a liquid shutoff and an automation wire. We have a liquid pipe element sensor here that's detecting polluted water. When there's enough polluted water in the line, it'll back up and sit in this tile. When it does that, it sends out a green signal, and if water's been sitting in that pipe for more than 10 seconds, the filter gate sends the green signal on, right into this liquid shutoff, which allows water to pass. If there wasn't any polluted water in this line, which will probably happen in, I don't know, 50 to 100 cycles, it would send a red signal. The red signal will disable the liquid shutoff, causing water to back up into this pipe, and then water will back up to the water sieve, and finally, the polluted water will be allowed to bypass the water sieve and head up to the fertilizer synthesizer. I joked that it'd be 50 to 100 cycles, but I was sort of being serious. The fertilizer synthesizer only uses 39 grams a second, which means it takes it about a half a cycle to use one liquid pipe worth of polluted water. With that system fixed, let's turn to our next dumpster fire, and that is our poor bristle blossoms that are not able to grow. And lucky for us, we now have plastic. Now, being that we have two saltwater geysers that have the 95-degree water, instead of cooling both separately, I figured it'd be better to cool everything here. The problem is, where am I going to put it? I suppose we have a little bit of room here, and we'll be able to run the Thermo Aqua Tuner's radiant pipes going this way, basically cooling and keeping all three of these tanks in equilibrium. And here's what that system's going to look like. We got a standard Thermo Aqua Tuner setup here, brine on the bottom, water on the top, and the cooling loop is going to come out of the Aqua Tuner, go around to all three tanks, and that's pretty much it. Now the rest of these pipes are going to get a rework here soon as well, because we want each tank to have its own desalinator. Filling the loop's going to be easy enough. We're literally just going to plug it right in right there. We can also go ahead and close this up as well. Why do we not have any power yet? Missing bridge. Classic Echo. Now we're using saltwater, which means we're not going to have the best thermals in the world. It has a range of -7 to 99.7 and a thermal conductivity of 0.60. But it'll be fine. I could have used the polluted water, but it was way over here, and we needed it here, and let's be honest, this was just really easy to tie that in. Now all we have to do is turn this thing on. I want all the water to be 20 degrees. And then we'll throw 800 kilos worth of our last bit of cobalt into a steam turbine and place it right here. Now I'd like to eventually get this power spine up here, so the steam turbine can dump some of its power back onto the grid, but this is a lot easier for now. Well, the cooling system's in, although to be quite honest, it's going to take a little while. So progress on our water upgrade is kind of ground to a halt for one specific reason, and we're kind of in trouble. All the suits are worn out. We have Repair Atmo suit on, but we're out of reed fiber. So for now, we're just going to have to disable the whole Atmo suit thing. This water is not going to be hot anymore, and they'd have no reason to go down here. So until we get an ample supply of reed fiber, we're taking the dupes out of suits. Really wish I had some thimble reed right about now. Using all this polluted water, we could be churning out the reed fibers. After some investigation, I realized I had completely forgotten to put hydrogen inside the Dreco Ranch. The poor Drecos have been walking around with their butts hanging out since they got here. So we're going to put 2 layers of hydrogen in here, hopefully, as long as I don't forget, to stop dropping off bottles, and that will help our reed fiber situation a lot. We now have 2 plus a little bit more layers of hydrogen because someone forgot to turn the canister emptier off. But the good news is the reed fiber is starting to flow again. All the Drecos spend probably about 50% of their day climbing on the ceiling regrowing their reed fiber. In fact, we're back up to about 5 suits. So we turned the suits back on and finished our water project. The system is a little simpler, although admittedly, it does look like a pile of spaghetti. Salt water is going to come in from 2 different locations. This geyser and this one. As it comes in, it's going to be dumped into this tank, so long as this hydro sensor isn't triggered, turning the input off. These liquid pumps, both one here in the saltwater tank and one in the brine tank, feed directly into their desalinators, and then the output goes directly onto our main water line. Now right now we're peeling off about 50% of this to fill this tank back up with regular water for things like research, so the line's a little bit barren, but as soon as it's full everything will start backing up again. The coolant line is doing okay. Right now it's down to about 47 degrees. You gotta remember, it had to cool down this entire tank, and this cool salt slush geyser that's going to be assisting in this process is still dormant for another 8.5 cycles. But once we start putting chill back into this tank, it's going to allow the cooling system to get caught up, and then any new water will be joining a bunch of already chilled water. So the system should, and I put the emphasis on should, stabilize. For now though, the Thermo Aqua Tuner is going to be running at 100%. We're going to check back here in a few once this thing comes out of dormancy, just to make sure the thermals are good. Also, thanks to the meteors, we're starting to get a nice healthy supply of uranium ore. Every once in a while, we just do a dig command. Ooh, that would have been bad. And then they drop it off to this storage bin down here. So far with those meteors and some of the little bits of uranium we've had to dig up, we've already got 3 tons of uranium ore. Not to mention the bees doing the good work. This beta hive is up to almost 4 tons of enriched uranium, which is enough to run a research reactor for 400 cycles. Unfortunately, snow has sort of made a bad time for this beta hive. They were up to about 1.5 tons of enriched uranium before it got entombed. Now, one of 2 things is going to happen. A, it's going to warm up a little bit to where the snow will melt. Or B, and this much more likely considering it's still minus 50, we're eventually going to have to tunnel through here and let the betas back out of the hive. Now, we were up to 1.3 million calories until the bristle blossoms have decided that they're not going to grow with the hot water, and now we're down to about 900,000. So until those bristleberries wake back up, I think we're going to go ahead and enable some frost buns. Since the sleet wheat has its own cooling system, even though the water's coming in at 62 degrees, they're still growing just fine. And then finally, over here in our fertilizer synthesizer, we're not 100% done yet. We're just letting all that natural gas sort of empty into the environment. I know, it's a huge waste, but that's why we built this nice little natural gas generator power plant. All the carbon dioxide that it vents is going to go directly to this carbon skimmer where it'll get processed, and all the polluted water coming from the natural gas geyser is just going to get pumped and thrown right onto the polluted water line. Now we just need the ability to be able to pump it down there. So we're going to throw in a nice steel gas pump and throw down a lot of gas bridges, connect them all with pipes, and then finally, from the very top of the base down here to the bottom, we can plug the natural gas in. The last thing we're going to want to add is an atmo sensor, because the natural gas is the environment keeping everything from overheating, so we'll make sure there's always, say, 500 grams of natural gas in here at all times. Remember, the fertilizer synthesizer only produces 10 grams per second. The natural gas generator can eat 90 grams per second. So this is not going to be a lot of power, but at least we're doing something useful with the natural gas. Normally I'd say we can just throw it into a gas oven. But to be honest, since our colony is 100% on berry sludge, we won't ever need a gas oven. Maybe in the very late game, when we want to get some fancier foods to feed to the hermit, but for now, this works out just fine. The last thing we want to do in our fertilizer room here is deliver the fertilizer, because the more duplicants walk through here, the more the valuable natural gas is going to end up being vented into the environment. And with Miss Pandamanda grabbing the last piece of debris to pick up, we can actually lock this room forever, and all that's left is dropping off the fertilizer. Auto Super's going to grab it, put it in this conveyor loader, and it's just going to dump right here in the bristle blossom farm. You know, the one that doesn't actually grow any bristle blossoms. Somehow, this insulated liquid pipe got a little bit of damage. None of the salt water is missing, nor did it get hot enough or cold enough to flash in the pipes. So I have no idea what could have caused it. So I don't think you can actually repair through a corner, but we're going to give it a try anyways. Unfortunately, we'll have to stop our cooling for just a minute, because the steam turbine is not going to be able to run, and I don't want the thermal aqua tuner breaking. Alright, well that didn't work, and I'm not staring at this for the next 3,000 cycles, so it's time to make a giant mess. Yay! And since we'll be in there already, we might as well scoop up the salt, but the idea is going to be that we get this repaired before all the steam comes out. I'm not worried about the dupes, because they're in suits, but it's definitely going to make a mess. Everything's fixed, all the debris out of here, and there's still a decent amount of steam in here. Now all we have to do is put a rush on that tile right there, and look at that. All we have left in here is steam and water, and just a slight mess everywhere. No big deal. I couldn't figure out why the fertilizer synthesizer stopped working, and it's because once again I forgot to put in a bridge. Something about me and bridges just don't get along, do we? With it working again, the natural gas is starting to rise. We're at about 460 grams. We set the Atmos sensor on the 500 grams. So in just a minute, the natural gas generator is going to run for like a half a second. Here comes that little bit of natural gas now. So yeah, it doesn't produce a lot of natural gas like we were saying before, but at least now we have fertilizer forever, which is one day going to help feed our colony. So I'm sure some people were wondering why I chose to have the radiant liquid pipe go all the way through even the brine tank, and this is for a couple of reasons. One, remember, we don't want to desalinate minus 10 degree water, because it'll flash in the pipes as soon as the desalinator turns it into regular water, and minus 10 degree water is not a thing. That's called ice. The other reason though is it's going to help the cooling loop. This minus 10 degree brine instantly mixes with the salt water, and once there's enough of a backlog, will help keep the salt water nice and cold. You know, what was supposed to be just a regular colony tune-up day has really turned into fixing more of Echo's mistakes. Can anybody guess why all the natural gas is backed up? And considering how long it takes for that room to create natural gas, you can tell it's been here for quite some time. The gas pipes are incorrectly. That's right, I hooked the automation wire up to the liquid pump. Because, of course I did. There we go. That's much better. Can anybody tell me what's going on here? Ah, yes. Temperature issues. This entire area ranges from 70 degrees all the way down to 57. And that's because we didn't use insulated piping here. We thought we were going to cool the water here, but we didn't end up doing that. So now we need to replace all these pipes with insulated pipes, because this is having a bigger problem than you'd think. First, the hot pipes were transferring with the metal tile. That's not good. But all that heat was slowly starting to slip into our base as well. And with our oxygen not quite as cool as it used to be, it now hovers around 28, 29 degrees. We're going to have to get a cooling package down there soon as well. The mealwoods have started to stifle, which would end up killing all of our Drecos. I thought about switching this cooling loop over to polluted water. Polluted water has a thermal conductivity of 0.58 and a specific heat capacity of 4.1. Well, that's when I learned something. Salt water is actually better than polluted water. I never knew that. It has a higher thermal conductivity and just about the same specific heat capacity. So the only thing I can really do right now is either A, add another steam turbine and thermal aqua tuner setup, or B, just wait for the cool salt slush geyser to keep erupting. Eventually all this cold brine is going to get up to the point of these radiant liquid pipes, and it's really going to start driving down the temps. By the way, for those of you who keep noticing this damaged overheat, it's not anything we've done. It's just this security door over on Idololan. We've never even gone down that far, but the little bit of visibility that we did get allowed it to appear, and this will normally happen when you have gravitas buildings inside your oil biome, because the oil biomes always come out hot. Man, I really do want to come back here soon and grab all this igneous rock and granite. I'm going to strip mine this planet right down to its core one day. Look at this! All the carbon dioxide in this area has finally been scrubbed. And it's a good thing too, because our power transformer is flooded, which means half our spawn's not getting any power. This is occurring because all the surrounding ice in the area is starting to melt. But we're going to take advantage of that fact and start pumping it right into our oxygen supply. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. Colony achievement earned. Maybe it's the achievement for have your bristle blossoms stifled for 50 cycles. And nowhere to go. Have 8 duplicants wear non-default clothing simultaneously. The last little update for today's is the taming of this saltwater geyser over here. We've got 2 pumps right now, one to get rid of all the backlog water, and one that's going to stay in place. Right now we're only powering it by a wheel and a battery, because we're hurting on refined materials, and I'm not starting this metal refinery until the temperature stabilizes over here. The pipe itself comes out of the saltwater geyser and heads insulated up until the point where it's just a vacuum, and then it just shares a 50-50 input into the saltwater tank. Speaking of which, the saltwater tank itself is down to about 32 degrees. The regular water, 22, and the brine, 23. Our coolant has finally started taking over. The coolant's coming back in at 25, and it goes out around 12. We have this set on 15, just to make sure it gets us to a comfortable range. And even the bristle blossoms have started waking up again. Rejoice! Berry sludge is back on the menu. Between now and then, we're probably going to end up putting a cooling system on the oxygen supply. Whether or not that cooling system incorporates this carbon dioxide geyser with its minus 55 degree carbon dioxide remains to be seen. We're not going to be able to build any test systems for another 28 cycles. And that is for sure not happening today. I know this episode didn't necessarily have anything new and flashy, other than, say, our water system redesign and cooling, but some of this stuff we really needed to get ahead of. But now that we have a suit system online, we have reed fiber and plastic coming in. In fact, we're up to 11 tons of plastic and 106 units worth of reed fiber. But now that all that's taken care of, we can really turn our attention to some bigger and better projects. I'm thinking next has to be the industrial brick. So let me know in the comments below if there's anything crazy you want to see out of the industrial brick. I'm personally thinking of a reactor industrial brick combo. We'll call it the nuclear brick. So until next time, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.